It was mid-November last year when my life began to unravel in ways I couldn't have imagined. Losing my job had been sudden. One moment I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee and answering emails, and the next, my supervisor was handing me a folder and telling me there'd been budget cuts. His voice was polite, almost mechanical, but I could feel the cold finality in it. No discussion, no warning, just gone. For the first week, I told myself I'd be fine. I had savings, after all. My apartment was paid up for the next month, and I could take my time finding the right position. But by the second week, that confidence began to rot. Every morning I'd sit in my dimly lit living room, hunched over my laptop, scrolling through endless job listings until the words blurred together. I sent out dozens of applications, and the silence in response became deafening. That night, my frustration turned into desperation. I found myself wandering to smaller, less reputable job boards, the kind buried deep in Google's search results with outdated designs and broken links. I knew I shouldn't have trusted them, but I couldn't shake the thought. Maybe here I'd find something no one else had noticed. That's when I saw it. A listing for a sales position offering pay far above anything I'd seen lately. The job description was oddly vague, but it promised rapid career growth for committed applicants, and mentioned that the company valued urgency. On impulse, I sent my resume, barely thinking about it. Less than an hour later, I got a reply. The email's subject line simply read, "Interview tonight, urgent." The sender introduced himself as Zach, the hiring manager. His tone was oddly direct, almost aggressive, as if I had been the one keeping him waiting. He explained that his schedule was extremely tight and asked if I could meet him that very night for a one-on-one interview. It was already past 6 p.m. The request made my skin crawl, but the thought of passing up a good-paying job gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Zach responded within seconds, sending only an address and the time, 7:30 p.m. No company name, no phone extension, just an address. I had no time to prepare, no time to research. By the time I left, the streets were emptying, the November air cold enough to sting my lungs. As I drove, I noticed something strange. The address took me away from the city into a quieter industrial area. By the time I arrived, I was pulling into a cracked asphalt lot in front of a squat, windowless building. There were no signs, no logos, not even a for lease banner. The place looked abandoned. All the lights were off inside. The parking lot was completely empty. The only thing marking the building at all was a weathered metal plate by the door with a faded number etched into it. Something in my gut told me to leave. Still, I checked the email on my phone. Same address. No mistake. I even Googled it, but nothing came up except a blurry street view image from years ago. The building looked the same then. Empty. Dead. I called the number from Zach's email. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. The silence of the lot pressed in on me. No passing cars, no distant hum of traffic, just the faint rustle of dead leaves scraping across the asphalt. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. 15 minutes passed. No one came. No lights flicked on. My unease curdled into something sharper. I got back in my car, trying to ignore the sensation that someone was watching me from one of those darkened windows. As I drove away, I glanced into my rearview mirror. The building was just a black block against the night sky. But for a split second, I thought I saw movement. The outline of someone standing in the lot, watching my taillights fade. By the time I reached home, I had almost convinced myself I imagined it. I tried to shake it off. Maybe Zach had given me the wrong address. Maybe it was some bizarre prank. I didn't want to think about it any longer. I unlocked my door, stepped into the warmth of my apartment, and shut it behind me with a sigh of relief. The lights felt too bright after the emptiness of that lot. I grabbed a beer, slouched onto the couch, and turned on the TV. The canned laughter of a sitcom filled the room, comforting in its normalcy. But then I heard it. A faint creak upstairs. It wasn't loud, just the slow groan of old wood under shifting weight. I froze, listening. A house settling. That's all it was, I told myself. I'd heard it 100 times before. I took a sip of my beer. The sound came again, longer this time. I turned up the TV and tried to ignore it. Somewhere deep inside me, though, something whispered. "You left the house unlocked while you got ready earlier, didn't you?" I tried to drown out the noise with the TV. The canned laughter kept spilling from the speakers, but I wasn't really hearing it. Every few minutes, the creak would return, soft, deliberate, as if the ceiling itself was being tested by careful steps. My mind kept offering reasonable explanations. Maybe the wood was expanding in the cold night air. Maybe a pipe was shifting. But the sound wasn't random. It had a rhythm. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. As if someone were moving very slowly, trying not to be heard. I leaned back, glancing toward the ceiling as though I might see something through the plaster. My hand tightened around the beer can without realizing it. The living room felt too quiet in between each sound, as though the whole apartment was holding its breath. After nearly half an hour, the noises stopped. I told myself I was imagining things, maybe still on edge from the weird, empty building earlier. Still, the unease lingered, wrapping itself around my thoughts like cold vines. By 10 p.m., my eyes were heavy, and I decided to call it a night. I turned off the TV, shut off the lights downstairs, and climbed the staircase. The upstairs hallway felt colder than usual. I remember thinking I could see my breath just barely in the faint glow from my phone screen. Inside my bedroom, I dropped my phone onto the nightstand and pulled the covers over me. The moment my head hit the pillow, sleep pulled me under. When I woke again, I didn't know how much time had passed. The darkness was absolute, the kind where you can't tell if your eyes are open. Something was different. The silence was too sharp, like the air before a scream. And then I heard it. Creak. Only this time, it wasn't above me. It was inside my room. The officer's shout made my stomach twist. "Got him!" For a moment, relief washed through me, but it was short-lived. The sound of scuffling footsteps echoed from upstairs, followed by the heavy thump of something hitting the wall. One of the officers barked orders, their voice strained, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of metal handcuffs snapping shut. When they brought him down the stairs, my blood ran cold. He wasn't wearing shoes. His feet were filthy, smeared with something dark. Maybe dirt, maybe not. His clothes were damp and wrinkled, clinging to him like he'd been outside in the cold for hours. His hair was long and oily, hanging in matted clumps over his face, but not enough to hide those eyes. Wide, unblinking, almost too round, the whites stark against the dim light. He looked hungry. I stood frozen as they walked him past me. He turned his head just enough to lock eyes with me, holding the gaze far longer than any normal person would. There was no flicker of fear or shame, just a strange, patient calm, as if he knew something I didn't. The officers didn't stop to explain. They loaded him into the back of the patrol car. One of them came over, asking if I could walk them through what happened. I told him everything, from the job listing to the noises upstairs. That's when the older officer frowned. "You said this guy was in your closet when you got home." "Yes." "Then how do you think he got in?" I hesitated. "Through the front door? I must have left it unlocked." The officer shook his head. The front door was locked when we arrived. All windows locked too, no signs of forced entry. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Then how? He didn't finish my sentence, just said they'd take the guy in for questioning and have someone check the house for signs of entry later. When the patrol cars pulled away, the silence that returned was unbearable. The house felt wrong, not just violated but altered somehow, like the air itself carried the residue of his presence. Still, I forced myself to go back inside. The officers had left the closet door open. I stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at the dark gap. Inside, the smell hit me first. Damp, stale, like wet earth. I flicked on the light, half expecting to see it empty. Instead, I found signs of him. In the back corner, behind a hanging coat, there was a blanket, ragged, covered in grime. Beside it, a small pile of food wrappers and empty water bottles. And there, scratched faintly into the wall, were marks. Dozens of them, straight vertical lines, grouped in fives, like someone had been keeping count of the days. Some of the lines were fresh. I stepped back, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a break-in. He'd been here before. Days, maybe weeks, sleeping in my closet while I lived my life completely unaware. I stumbled out of the room, my mind spinning, but then I heard it, the faint sound of wood shifting. Not from the closet this time, from the attic above. I froze. The police had left. I was alone. And now I realized they'd never checked the attic. Grabbing my phone, I dialed the station, my voice breaking as I told them I still heard movement in the house. They told me to get outside and wait for a unit. I backed towards the stairs, eyes locked on the ceiling. Then came the sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. A slow, dragging crawl directly above me, moving toward the attic hatch in the hallway. Something heavy shifted. And then, a laugh. It wasn't loud, it wasn't manic, it was low, almost a chuckle, but it carried a weight that made my skin crawl. Whoever, whatever was up there, had been waiting. I bolted outside into the freezing night air, my breath clouding in front of me. I stood in the yard, phone pressed to my ear, watching my darkened house. From one of the upstairs windows, the curtain moved. A pale hand curled around the edge. Not the man they had arrested, someone else. The curtain fell back into place. The police arrived minutes later, tearing through the house, but they found nothing. The attic was empty. They told me it was probably my imagination, the adrenaline messing with my senses, but I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I moved out within the week. Every so often, I checked the news. The man they arrested, Jack, never confessed to anything, but the detectives say his laptop contained hundreds of fake job listings. They believe he targeted people who lived alone, using interviews as bait to get them out of the house. But that's not the worst part. Some of the victims on his list were reported missing long before those job ads were posted, which means maybe he wasn't the only one. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed in my new apartment, I swear I hear it again. That slow, deliberate creak from above, like someone shifting their weight and waiting.